My name is Courtney. The night my world cracked wide open did not begin with shouts or slammed doors. It began with a flash of gold on another woman's hand, a single gleam under candlelight that burned straight into me. Daniel and I had been married less than a year. People still called us the newlyweds. He wore that title like a medal, telling everyone how lucky he was, how he had won the jackpot. I wanted to believe it. I wanted the glow to last. That is why I agreed to attend a dinner with his colleagues, even though I dreaded the artificial laughter and endless small talk. The restaurant was elegant but intimate, with warm lighting and velvet curtains that muffled the noise of the city outside. A long mahogany table stretched across the center of the room, already crowded with glasses, plates, and the hum of conversation. Daniel held my hand as we entered, smiling the same polished smile he wore in boardrooms. "You look beautiful," he whispered, adjusting the pearls around my neck. My grandmother's pearls. The ones he had clasped himself on the night he proposed. I smiled, though my stomach fluttered with unease. Then she arrived. Elena. She walked in as though she owned the room, every step deliberate. She was introduced as a close friend of Daniel's from work. I had met her once in passing, and even then, something in her eyes had unsettled me. Too much familiarity when she spoke his name, too much warmth in her smile. She sat directly across from me. Her lips curled into a practiced grin as she lifted her glass of wine. And that was when I saw it. The ring. A gold band, delicate but unmistakable, with a ruby flanked by 2 diamonds. The very same ring Daniel had told me he lost. My chest went cold, my pulse hammering so loudly I could barely hear the laughter around me. Months earlier, he had come home pale and frantic. "Courtney, I can't find it," he had said. "The ring slipped off somewhere. I'll replace it, I promise." He had kissed my forehead, reassured me, and I had swallowed his words whole. Because he was Daniel, the man I loved, the man who had promised me forever. But now, here it was, gleaming on Elena's hand as she toyed with her glass, the ruby catching the candlelight like a cruel joke. I tried to eat. I tried to smile. My lips curved, my voice even, but every time I looked up, the ring mocked me. Daniel told stories, made jokes, basked in the admiration of his colleagues. But I noticed the flicker of his gaze, how it darted to Elena's hand, then quickly away. At dessert, she leaned forward, her voice coated with sugar. "Courtney, you have such lovely taste. Daniel told me you prefer subtle jewelry. I suppose that leaves the bolder pieces for friends like me." Her fingers brushed her hair back deliberately, the ring flashing under the chandelier. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against porcelain. Heads turned briefly, but Daniel recovered quickly, laughing it off. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his smile tight. To the room it looked affectionate. To me it felt like a warning. Don't make a scene. Inside, the storm had already begun. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Streetlights cut across Daniel's face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. Finally he spoke. "You were quiet tonight." I stared out the window, my reflection pale in the glass. I saw it. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Saw what?" "The ring." My voice was low, steady. "The one you swore you lost." He inhaled sharply, then forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Courtney, you're imagining things. Lots of rings look alike." But I knew better. That ruby, those diamonds, the faint scratch on the band. I had memorized them the day he slipped it onto my finger, long before he replaced it with something new. I turned back to him, my voice sharp. "Don't call me crazy. Not tonight." His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. When we arrived home, he kissed my cheek stiffly, muttered, "I'm tired," and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the shadows dancing across the walls. The whisper of doubt that had haunted me for months was gone. What I had seen was real. The betrayal was real. I rose, walked to the dresser, and opened the drawer where I once kept the original ring box. Empty, just as he had left it. I closed it softly, then pressed my palms against the wood until my hands steadied. From that night forward, I promised myself one thing. I would no longer take his words as truth. I would gather my own. Because Daniel thought he could bury me under lies. But I would rise with proof. The next morning, Daniel brewed coffee like nothing had happened. The kitchen smelled of roasted beans and buttered toast, but the tension between us was thick, sharp enough to cut. He hummed as he buttered his bread, as if humming could erase the memory of last night. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around a mug, watching him carefully. His movements were polished, practiced, but his eyes avoided mine. Finally I spoke. "Daniel, we need to talk about the ring." His hand froze for a fraction of a second before continuing smoothly. "Courtney, I told you, it must have just looked similar. Elena wears a lot of jewelry." I shook my head. It wasn't similar. It was the ring. The ruby, the diamonds, even the scratch on the band. I saw it. He sighed dramatically, setting his knife down with a clatter. "You're letting your imagination run wild. You've been stressed. Work, family. It's making you see things that aren't there." Gaslighting, polished and deliberate. I didn't argue. I had learned that pressing him too hard only gave him more opportunities to twist the truth. Instead, I sipped my coffee in silence. Inside, though, a seed of determination sprouted. That day I started watching more closely. Daniel claimed he had an evening meeting, but when he returned, his jacket smelled faintly of perfume. Floral, sweet, and nothing I owned. I noted the time on my phone. 10:17 p.m. I remembered Elena's crimson nails drumming the table the night before. Her perfume had lingered in the air then too. The next morning, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his pants pocket. A fine jewelry store downtown. My breath caught as I scanned the details. One gold bracelet purchased 3 days earlier. No mention of a ring, no explanation given. When I asked him about it casually over dinner, he smiled smoothly. "A client owed me a favor. I thought I'd pick up something nice. But they didn't have what I wanted, so I'll go back another time." I nodded, biting my tongue. He hadn't bought me jewelry in months. Later, when he showered, I snapped a photo of the receipt and tucked it back in place. By the end of that week, the cracks widened. On Thursday, he came home late again, claiming he had drinks with coworkers. I logged onto social media and froze. Elena had posted a photo. A glass of red wine on a marble table, captioned, "Celebrating the end of a long day with the best company." The timestamp matched the time Daniel texted me. I took a screenshot immediately, my hands trembling, then saved it to a hidden folder on my phone. Friday night, Daniel kissed my forehead and said he'd be working late at the office. Hours later, I checked our location-sharing app, the one he'd encouraged me to install months ago to keep each other safe. His little red dot didn't glow near the office. It pulsed downtown near Elena's apartment building. I stared at the screen, my chest heavy, my hands cold. The map didn't lie. He was with her. When he returned near midnight, I pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed quietly, smelling faintly of wine and perfume. My heart pounded, but I kept my breathing even. He wrapped an arm around me as though nothing had happened. In the dark, I whispered to myself, "This is real. You're not imagining it." The next day, I decided I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof that would silence his denials forever. So I began keeping a hidden notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "The ring. Dinner. Elena." I glued the jewelry store receipt there. On the next page, I pasted a printed screenshot of Elena's wine post. Every detail mattered. Every timestamp was a weapon waiting to be used. But proof comes at a cost. That evening, I joined Daniel at another company gathering. He introduced me warmly, kissed my cheek for show, and laughed easily with colleagues. But across the room, Elena's eyes locked on mine. She lifted her glass, tilting it just enough for the ruby to catch the light. My pulse surged. When dessert arrived, she leaned close to the woman beside her and whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "Some treasures aren't meant to be hidden." The ruby gleamed again as her laughter cut through the room. I forced a smile for appearances, but my nails dug into my palm under the table. Daniel glanced at me nervously, his mask slipping for a split second. He knew I had heard. That night when we got home, he tried again. "Courtney, don't read into things. You're making something out of nothing." But his words were hollow now. I had seen too much. I had the receipts, the screenshots, the map. And I had her whisper echoing in my head. What began with a ring was unraveling into something far bigger. Once the seed of doubt became a garden of facts, I knew I needed to move carefully. Daniel was clever. He could turn words into weapons, twist suspicion into paranoia, and smile so smoothly the world believed him. But paper did not lie. Screenshots did not lie. Receipts and timestamps had no agenda. They simply told the truth. So I began to build my fortress of evidence. I bought a plain leather-bound notebook, dark brown, unremarkable. On the inside cover, I wrote a single word in neat letters: proof. The first entry was the jewelry store receipt I had found in Daniel's pocket. I photographed it, printed a copy, and taped it to the page. Below it I wrote, "Purchase gold bracelet not received. Recipient unknown." The second entry was Elena's wine post. I printed it and attached it with clear tape, the caption celebrating with the best company, glaring back at me. Next to it, I wrote the exact time Daniel had texted me that he was still at the office. Side by side, the lie and the truth stood together. Within days, the notebook began to fill. Daniel claimed he was stuck late at work again on Tuesday. I checked the location sharing app. The red dot pulsed near the waterfront, far from his office. I drove there, parking 2 blocks away, and waited. At 9:43 p.m. I saw him emerge from a bistro, Elena at his side. She wore the ring openly, her hand brushing his arm. I lifted my phone and snapped photos one after another, my hand steady despite the tremor in my chest. Later that night, while he showered, I printed the pictures on my small home printer and glued them into the notebook. I added a note beneath them: "Dinner with Elena, Waterfront Bistro, 9:43 p.m. Ring visible on her hand. The notebook grew heavier by the week. On Thursday, I found another receipt, this time from a boutique hotel. 1 room, 2 glasses of wine charged to the minibar. Time-stamped exactly when Daniel had told me he was catching up on reports. I taped it into the book, the paper crackling as I smoothed it down. That weekend, I called Claire, my oldest friend. I didn't tell her everything yet. Only asked if she could help me quietly collect backups. "If I send you photos or files," I said, my voice low, "keep them safe. Don't ask questions, at least not yet." She hesitated, then said, "Whatever you need." With her help, I created digital copies of everything, saved on a hidden drive. If Daniel ever discovered the notebook, there would still be a trail he could not erase. I began checking bank statements too. Purchases I hadn't noticed before leapt out at me. Restaurants I had never been to, charges from high-end boutiques, even a pair of theater tickets I hadn't used. Each entry became another line in the notebook, another nail in the coffin of his lies. One night, Daniel left his phone unattended while he showered. My heart pounded as I opened it. Most of their conversations had been deleted, but fragments remained. A photo of wine glasses clinking, a message that read, "Last night was perfect." Another, "Wear the ring tonight. It suits you." My hand shook, but I captured every image, every word. I slid them into the notebook under the title, "Direct Messages." By the time 2 weeks passed, the notebook was no longer thin. It bulged with papers, receipts, screenshots, and photographs. Each page was a blade, sharp and undeniable. But the moment that confirmed everything came on a rainy Friday night. Daniel claimed he was working late again. My instincts screamed otherwise. I checked the app. The dot glowed not near his office, not near Elena's apartment, but at a hotel downtown. I grabbed my keys and drove there, parking across the street. Rain streaked the windshield as I waited, my wipers moving slowly. At 10:11 p.m. I saw them. Daniel and Elena walked into the lobby together. His hand pressed lightly against her back. She laughed, tilting her head, the ruby on her finger glinting under the lobby lights. I snapped photo after photo, each click like thunder in my chest. When I returned home, I added them to the notebook. On the opposite page, I taped a printout of the bank statement showing a charge from the very same hotel. I stared at the open book long into the night. It was no longer a collection of suspicions. It was a case, airtight and undeniable. And as I closed the cover, I whispered to myself, "One day soon, Daniel, you won't be able to call me paranoid. You won't be able to deny it. Because the truth will be staring you in the face." By the time the notebook bulged with evidence, I knew I could not hold its weight alone. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact stacked on every page. But facts in silence can be twisted. I needed witnesses, people who would stand beside me when the storm broke. If Daniel tried to call me paranoid again, others would be there to echo the truth. The first person I turned to was Claire, my best friend since college. She had been there when Daniel and I first met, had listened to my giddy confessions, had toasted with champagne at our engagement party. She was also the one who had raised a quiet eyebrow at Elena months earlier, though I had brushed it off. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with chipped mugs and soft jazz humming through speakers. I carried the notebook in my bag, its weight pressing into my side like a hidden weapon. Claire slid into the booth across from me, her hair damp from the drizzle outside. "You sounded serious on the phone," she said. "What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled the notebook out and laid it on the table between us. She opened it carefully, flipping through the pages. Her face shifted slowly, from curiosity to shock, from shock to anger. She lingered on the photographs of Daniel outside Elena's apartment, the hotel receipt, the screenshots of Elena's posts. By the time she closed it, her hands trembled. "Courtney," she whispered, "this is undeniable. He's been living a double life." I nodded, my throat tight. "And he told me I was imagining it. He called me paranoid." Her eyes blazed. "You're not paranoid. You're patient. You're meticulous. And now you have him cornered." She reached across the table, gripping my hand. "When you're ready, I'll be there." Her loyalty wrapped around me like armor. The second person I turned to was my sister, Rachel. She had always been fiercely protective, sometimes to the point of being overbearing. But I needed her strength now. That evening, I invited her to my apartment for dinner. Daniel claimed he had a late client meeting, which suited me perfectly. After we ate, I brought out the notebook. Rachel frowned as I set it on the table. "What's this?" "Read," I said simply. She flipped through the pages slowly, carefully, her jaw tightening with each one. When she reached the photo of Daniel and Elena walking into the hotel lobby, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she closed the book and looked at me with eyes that burned. "I knew something was off," she said. "The late nights, the excuses. I wanted to believe he was just busy. But this is unforgivable." Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. She reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not alone, Courtney. You never will be. Tell me what you need, and I'll do it." I exhaled, relief washing over me. "Keep this safe. If anything happens, if he tries to twist things, this book has to survive. It's the truth." Rachel hugged me tightly. "It'll be safe with me. And when you're ready, I'll help you burn him down." Still, I knew family and friends weren't enough. If I wanted more than dramatic confrontation, I needed someone who understood law. Someone who could make sure my revenge wasn't just emotional, but airtight. That's when I made an appointment with Evelyn Carter, a lawyer recommended by a colleague. Her office was sleek and modern, glass walls reflecting the city lights. She listened carefully as I explained, her expression unreadable but sharp. When I laid the notebook before her, she turned each page with steady hands, taking notes. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked me in the eye. "You already have more than enough to file for divorce. Infidelity, financial misconduct. It's all here. But I suspect you want more than a clean break." I nodded. "I want the truth to be undeniable. Not just in court. In front of everyone." Her lips curved slightly. "Then timing will be everything. You need a stage where he feels most invincible, where the fall will be sharpest." I thought of Daniel bragging about the upcoming charity gala. He's giving a speech next month. Donors, colleagues, family, everyone will be there. Her eyes gleamed. "Perfect. That's where you strike. I'll prepare the paperwork so it's ready to file the next morning. By then, he'll have nothing left." When I left her office, the night air felt lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying this weight alone. Claire, Rachel, Evelyn, they were my circle. My notebook was no longer just mine to protect. Its truth had witnesses now. Its power was multiplied. That night, Daniel came home whistling, kissed my cheek and said, "We should start planning for the gala. It'll be my big night." I smiled faintly, my voice steady. "Yes," I whispered. "Unforgettable." He didn't hear the steel in my tone. Once the shock hardened into resolve, planning became my lifeline. Rage without direction burns out quickly. But rage sharpened into a plan becomes something else entirely: justice. The gala was Daniel's obsession. He had been talking about it for weeks. It was the event of the season for his company. Donors, investors, executives, even a few politicians in attendance. He was scheduled to give the keynote speech. He loved the spotlight, and I knew that was where his downfall had to happen. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, I gathered my allies in my living room. Claire brought her laptop, Rachel carried the notebook in a tote bag, and Evelyn arrived with a folder of legal documents. The four of us sat around my coffee table, the evidence spread before us like pieces of a chessboard. "We can't just confront him," Evelyn said, her tone calm but firm. "He'll twist it, deny it, gaslight you all over again. The exposure must be undeniable, immediate, and witnessed by everyone who matters to him." Rachel leaned forward, tapping the notebook. "This is the foundation. The receipts, the screenshots, the hotel charges, it's airtight. But it's not flashy. People forget words. They don't forget images." Claire nodded and opened her laptop. "I've already scanned every page. We can build a slideshow. Photos of him with Elena, screenshots of her posts, even the jewelry store receipt. If the projector at the gala connects, we can light up the screen behind him while he's still speaking." A spark ignited in my chest. I pictured Daniel at the podium, smiling confidently, while behind him, image after image told the truth he had buried. "But it can't just be documents," I said. "It has to hit him personally. Something symbolic. Something she flaunted but doesn't own." My eyes fell to the shelf, where the empty velvet ring box sat hidden behind books. The original band, the ruby and diamonds, lived on Elena's hand now. But the memory of what it meant, what it should have meant, still belonged to me. "The ring," I whispered. "It started with the ring. That's the symbol I want to use." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "How?" I exhaled slowly, the idea taking shape. At the height of his speech, when the applause is building, I'll walk forward with the evidence in hand. But instead of shouting or accusing, I'll stay calm. I'll point out the ring on Elena's finger. And then I'll hand her the proof, page after page showing that it was never lost, only stolen. If she denies it, the slideshow will back me up. If Daniel denies it, the documents will bury him. Claire leaned back, smiling grimly. "Elegant. No screaming. Just truth. You'll look steady, he'll look unhinged." Evelyn tapped her folder. "And the very next morning, I'll file the divorce papers. By the time he tries to recover, the legal process will already be moving. Public disgrace and legal ruin all in one blow." For hours we refined the plan. Claire prepared digital backups in case the projector failed. Rachel printed packets of evidence, ready to distribute at tables if needed. Evelyn drafted statements for court filings, ensuring that everything shown that night would be admissible. When they left, I sat alone in the dim light, rehearsing the moment in my mind. I pictured Daniel at the podium, glowing with pride. I pictured myself rising slowly, the room falling silent. I pictured Elena's smirk fading as I laid the truth in front of her. In the days leading up to the gala, I practiced in front of the mirror. I held the notebook like a shield, spoke the words aloud. "You told me the ring was lost. But here it is on her hand. And here is the proof of everything you tried to bury." Each rehearsal steadied me. Each repetition replaced fear with focus. Daniel noticed my calmness and mistook it for devotion. One night, as he adjusted his tuxedo jacket in the mirror, he smiled at me. "You'll be proud of me at the gala, Courtney. It's going to be the biggest night of my career." I forced a faint smile. "Yes," I said. "Unforgettable." What he didn't know was that I was no longer preparing to be his supportive wife. I was preparing to be his reckoning. The night would come. The stage would be his. But the truth, sharp, undeniable, would be mine. The night of the gala arrived with the weight of destiny. I had rehearsed this moment again and again, what to say, how to stand, how to keep my voice steady while his world crumbled. But no amount of rehearsal can prepare you for the way reality twists when the curtain rises. The venue glowed with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests in gowns and tuxedos flowed through the space, sipping champagne, their laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. Cameras flashed at the entrance, capturing donors and executives as if they were celebrities. Daniel thrived here. He greeted everyone with handshakes, backslaps, and the polished smile of a man who believed himself untouchable. He looked at me as we entered, his hand warm at the small of my back. "We're going to shine tonight," he whispered. oblivious to the fire simmering in my chest. I scanned the room. Claire stood near the sound booth, her laptop hidden in a sleek leather case. Rachel sat near the front, her clutch filled with printed evidence packets. Evelyn lingered by the exit doors, phone in hand, ready to file papers at dawn. Every ally was in position. The notebook was in my bag. The plan was ready. The evening unfolded slowly, every speech and toast dragging my nerves tighter. My hand brushed against the velvet folder inside my clutch again and again, reminding myself it was real, reminding myself I wasn't alone. Finally, the announcer stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Daniel Crawford. Applause thundered through the room. Daniel walked to the podium, his tuxedo catching the light, his smile broad and confident. He adjusted the microphone, his voice booming with practiced ease. "Tonight," he began, "is not about me. It is about all of us, the vision we share, the future we are building." The audience leaned in charmed. My pulse quickened. Soon, his words would shatter under the weight of truth. But then the first complication struck. The projector flickered. Once, twice, then it went black. Claire crouched immediately, fiddling with the cords, her brow furrowed. She gave me a quick shake of her head. Something wasn't connecting. The slideshow, the visual weapon that was supposed to silence his denials, was gone. My chest tightened. Without the slideshow, the plan lost its sharpest edge. I glanced at Rachel. She slipped her hand into her clutch, ready to distribute the printed packets as backup, but the impact would never be the same. I forced myself to breathe. One setback didn't mean failure. But then came the second. Elena walked in. She was late, intentionally so. She wore a silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her hair cascading in soft waves, her lips painted scarlet. And there on her finger gleamed the ring. My ring. She didn't slip into the shadows. She took a seat in the second row, directly in Daniel's line of sight. His voice faltered for a fraction of a second when he noticed her. His gaze flicked toward her hand, then back to the audience. He recovered quickly, raising his voice louder, almost too loud. "What we accomplished together is built on trust," he declared, though his eyes betrayed him. The whispers started instantly. Who is she? Why is he staring at her? A woman near the front frowned, her eyes narrowing as she noticed the ring. Claire caught my gaze from the back, her lips tightening. Rachel gave me the smallest nod. Evelyn's eyes stayed locked on me, calm and steady, as if to say, "It's still yours to control." My palms grew damp against the velvet folder. The plan had been to wait until the applause crested at the end of his speech, then strike with precision. But now the room was shifting, curiosity already stirring. If I waited too long, Elena might seize the narrative. Worse, Daniel might cut the speech short and slip away. I pictured it, him walking off the stage, arm in arm with her, spinning a story before I could act. The thought made my stomach turn. Daniel spread his arms wide, his smile sharp. "And tonight, I dedicate this speech to the people who believe in me most." His gaze lingered on Elena, and her lips curved into a smug smile. The audience clapped politely, though unease rippled beneath it. My pulse hammered. The slideshow was gone. Elena was seated boldly in the front. Daniel was seconds away from finishing his speech and escaping the trap. It was time. I pressed my chair back, the scrape loud against marble. Heads turned. Daniel froze, his eyes locking on me as his smile faltered. Elena shifted in her seat, her smirk deepening, as if waiting for me to break. I rose slowly, the velvet folder in my hands. My steps echoed through the hall as I moved forward. The ballroom fell silent, all eyes on me. The silence in the ballroom pressed against me as I walked down the aisle between the tables. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step louder than the last. Dozens of eyes followed me. I clutched the velvet folder in my hands, steady now, though my heart pounded like a drum inside my chest. Daniel froze at the podium, his smile stiffening, his fingers gripping the wood so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Courtney," he said into the microphone, his voice forced into a laugh. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned toward the audience, my voice carrying clearly across the room. "He told me the ring was lost." My eyes found Elena, seated confidently in her silver gown. I pointed at her hand. But there it is. On her finger. Gasps erupted through the room. Dozens of heads turned toward her, eyes widening as the ruby caught the chandelier's light. Whispers surged like a tide. Elena's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered, lifting her hand higher as if to flaunt it. "This," she said loudly, her voice dripping with false innocence. "It's just a gift. Daniel said it was nothing." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Daniel stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Courtney, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." I stepped closer, unfolding the folder. "No, Daniel. I'm showing them the truth." I held up the first page, a photograph of the jewelry store receipt, time-stamped and signed. "He bought gifts that never reached me." I flipped to the next, screenshots of Elena's posts, glasses of wine with captions about the best company. While I sat at home, he was here with her. The audience leaned forward, gasping as each page turned. Claire, from the back, began quietly distributing digital copies on tablets she had prepared as backup. Rachel, poised in the front row, pulled evidence packets from her clutch and slid them onto nearby tables. Daniel's face paled. "Stop this," he barked, his voice cracking. "This isn't the place." I kept my tone calm, my words deliberate. "You made it the place when you stood on this stage and spoke about trust. You told me I was imagining things. You called me paranoid. But the truth doesn't vanish because you dismiss it." The crowd shifted. A donor in the second row stood, pointing at Elena's hand. "That's the ring he told us he had replaced for his wife." Murmurs turned into shouts of recognition. Another guest hissed, "Disgraceful. Right here in front of everyone." Elena flushed crimson. She tried to shove her hand under the table, but it was too late. The damage was done. The ruby gleamed like a spotlight of guilt. I stepped closer to her, my voice steady. "He promised me forever with that ring. He said it was lost. And yet, here you are, wearing my vows on your finger as if they belonged to you." I bent down and placed the evidence folder in front of her. "Take a look. Every receipt, every photo, every lie documented. The ring is only the beginning." She shoved it back, her voice rising. "This is pathetic. You're jealous. He loves me, not you." Laughter broke out, not kind but bitter. A woman at the next table shook her head. "If he loved you, he wouldn't have stood at the altar with her last year. We were there." Daniel slammed his fist against the podium. "Enough. This is slander." His voice cracked with desperation. His perfect image fractured in real time. I turned to him, my chin high, my voice calm. "It's not slander when it's true. You lied to me. You lied to them. And tonight everyone sees it." The ballroom filled with voices now, outrage, condemnation, disbelief. Some stood shaking their heads. Others whispered angrily to each other. The tide had turned, and nothing Daniel said could stop it. Elena shoved her chair back abruptly, the legs screeching against marble. She stormed toward the exit, her silver gown trailing, her heels clicking like gunshots. The doors slammed behind her, leaving silence in her wake. Daniel stood alone at the podium, sweat glistening on his brow. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, the spotlight burned instead of praised. I faced the crowd one last time. "You believed his stories. So did I. But lies don't last forever. Tonight, the truth speaks louder." The audience stayed silent, watching him, judging him. And Daniel, the man who once lived for the spotlight, could no longer meet their eyes. The echo of the ballroom doors slamming shut after Elena stormed out lingered like a thunderclap. All eyes returned to Daniel. He stood at the podium, his hands gripping the wood as though it might anchor him. His once perfect tuxedo now soaked with sweat under the lights. The confidence he had worn like armor was gone. The silence was suffocating, until it broke all at once. Whispers surged through the crowd like wildfire. "Did you see the ring? Unbelievable." He lied right to her face. A man in the second row shook his head, muttering loud enough for others to hear. "Integrity? He just buried it himself." Daniel tried to speak, his voice trembling into the microphone. "Everyone, please, this is not what it looks like. Courtney is confused, she's..." The audience cut him off with laughter, sharp and bitter. Claire, standing at the back, raised her voice over the murmurs. "Confused? She showed us receipts, screenshots, photos. That's not confusion. That's fact. She lifted her tablet high, displaying the slideshow that refused to appear on the projector. The nearest guests crowded around to see, gasping as images of Daniel and Elena appeared on the screen. Rachel moved swiftly, pulling the envelopes from her clutch and sliding them across tables. Guests opened them, flipping through the evidence with growing outrage. Each paper was a dagger: restaurant receipts, bank charges, location logs. The whispers turned into open condemnation. A woman in pearls stood, glaring at Daniel. You told us you built your company on honesty. And here you are, exposed as a liar. Another donor followed, his deep voice carrying across the room. You made us believe in your character. We invested in you. Now I see what you really are. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Some guests pushed back their chairs and rose, shaking their heads in disgust. Others stayed seated, staring coldly at Daniel as though seeing him for the first time. Daniel's voice rose desperately, cracking. Please, you have to listen. Elena. She manipulated me, she. Laughter broke out again, this time harsher. One man sneered. Manipulated? You were feeding her with stolen gifts, sneaking into hotels. Don't insult us further. Daniel's mask crumbled piece by piece. His hands trembled on the podium. His eyes darted from table to table, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one did. Meanwhile, I stood tall in the center of the room. My breathing was steady, my voice calm when I finally spoke again. He told me the ring was lost. He swore to me it was gone. But you've all seen the truth tonight. Every lie, every betrayal, documented and undeniable. He didn't just betray me. He betrayed every single person who believed in his words. The ballroom erupted. Not with applause but with condemnation. One guest said loudly, I will not support a man who humiliates his wife while pretending to lead with honor. Another muttered, his career is finished. The host of the gala, pale and shaken, rushed onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we should bring this evening to a close. But the crowd was already moving. Donors gathered their coats. Executives whispered angrily to each other, some pulling out their phones to send messages. A few reporters in attendance scribbled furiously, already writing the headlines. Daniel sagged against the podium, his voice breaking as he whispered into the microphone. Courtney, please, not like this. I met his gaze, my chin high. No, Daniel. Exactly like this. In the same spotlight you loved so much. For a long moment he just stared at me, his eyes hollow. Then he stepped back, shoulders slumped, as though the weight of his own lies had finally crushed him. The audience began to file out, the sound of heels and shoes against marble echoing like a slow drumbeat. Some paused to touch my arm, whispering, You were brave. You showed grace. One woman leaned close and said, Thank you. I thought I was crazy once too. Claire joined me at my side, her eyes blazing with pride. Rachel slipped her hand into mine, steady and strong. Evelyn moved forward, her phone already glowing as she sent the prepared documents. By dawn, Daniel's disgrace would be sealed not only in memory, but in law. I turned once more toward the stage. Daniel stood alone under the chandeliers, the spotlight still shining but no longer warm. It burned now, harsh and merciless, illuminating every crack in his mask. For the first time, the man who thrived in attention looked small beneath it. The morning after the gala, I woke to sunlight streaming across the bed. For the first time in months, I did not feel dread pressing against my chest. The silence in the apartment was not heavy, it was peaceful. My phone buzzed incessantly. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. Videos of the gala had already gone viral. Clips of me standing tall in the ballroom, pointing at Elena's ring and laying out Daniel's lies, had spread across social media. Comments poured in. She handled it with grace. Proof always wins over charm. He called her paranoid, but she showed him. I scrolled slowly, my lips curving into a faint smile. The world had witnessed the truth. The man who once thrived on admiration had been exposed in the very spotlight he craved. Claire called first. Courtney, you were extraordinary. Do you know what you did last night? You didn't just free yourself. You gave everyone in that room permission to trust their instincts. Rachel arrived later with coffee and pastries. She hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm proud of you. You showed strength most people only dream of. Even Evelyn texted a brief message. Documents filed. He won't recover from this legally or socially. But Daniel could not stay away. By noon, a knock rattled my door. I hesitated before opening it. There he stood, the man who had once glowed with confidence. His tuxedo jacket was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. The perfect image he loved to project had shattered overnight. "Courtney," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "Please, we need to talk." I kept the door half open. "About what?" His lips trembled. "You destroyed me last night. The donors pulled out. The board suspended me this morning. Reporters won't leave me alone. And Elena," his voice cracked. "Elena won't even answer my calls. You've taken everything." I studied him quietly, my hand steady on the door. "No, Daniel. You took everything from yourself. I only revealed what you tried to bury." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I was weak, I made mistakes, but I love you. 10 years together, don't throw it all away." The words might have broken me once. But not now. I stood straighter. "You threw it away when you gave her my ring. When you lied to my face. When you called me paranoid instead of telling the truth. I am not what you have left, Daniel. I am what you lost." He flinched, the weight of my words landing like a blow. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged, his head bowed. Without another word he turned and shuffled down the hall, each step slower than the last. I closed the door gently, the lock clicking like a final verdict. That evening I met Evelyn at her office. She had already filed the divorce papers that morning. "Your case is airtight," she said, her tone brisk but warm. "Infidelity, financial misconduct, public humiliation. It's all documented. You'll keep the apartment, secure restitution, and he'll walk away with nothing but his disgrace." I signed the documents, the pen gliding smoothly across the page. My signature sealed the future. When I returned home, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, children rode their bikes, their laughter floating on the breeze. The world seemed ordinary, but to me it felt brand new. On the coffee table lay the velvet ring box. I opened it slowly, staring at the empty slot where the ruby and diamond band once sat. It no longer stabbed me with grief. Instead, it reminded me of how far I had come. I whispered to the quiet room. "This chapter is done." Weeks passed after the gala, and the chaos that had consumed my life began to settle into silence. Headlines faded, gossip quieted, and the frenzy of whispers died down. But for me, the story didn't end with the noise. It ended with a kind of peace I had almost forgotten existed. The divorce went through quickly. Evelyn guided me through each step, her calm professionalism keeping me steady. The court awarded me the apartment, financial restitution for the money Daniel had funneled into his double life, and full separation from the man who had tried to convince me I was crazy. When the judge's gavel fell, it felt like the sound of freedom. Daniel, I heard, spiraled. The board forced him to resign. Investors withdrew. Donors closed their doors. Some colleagues who once praised him cut ties overnight. Elena vanished from the city, chasing some new promise in some other corner of the world. He was left standing in the ruins he had built himself, without applause, without allies, without me. And me? I began again. The apartment that once felt like a cage slowly transformed into a sanctuary. I painted the bedroom walls a calming shade of green, bought fresh linens, and filled the space with plants that reached for the sunlight the way I was learning to. I replaced the heavy curtains Daniel had chosen with airy ones that let the morning light flood in. Each small change reminded me that I was reclaiming this place as mine. I found joy in things I had once set aside. I returned to painting, brushes moving across canvas in bold, imperfect strokes. I joined a yoga class on Saturday mornings. I spent evenings with Rachel's children, laughing as they dragged me into board games and messy art projects. Claire and I booked a weekend trip to the coast, where we stood barefoot on the sand, watching the horizon stretch endlessly before us. One evening I opened the notebook, the thick volume filled with every receipt, every screenshot, every proof of betrayal. It no longer burned to look at. Instead, it reminded me of the strength it took to build it page by page when I felt alone. It wasn't just a book of lies anymore. It was a book of survival. Beside it sat the empty velvet ring box. I touched it once, then closed it for good. The ring might have been stolen, but my power had been reclaimed. People sometimes ask me if I regret not leaving sooner. My answer is always the same: no. Because if I had left with only suspicion, doubt would have followed me. By staying long enough to collect the truth, I freed myself without question. I walked away not just with anger but with certainty. And certainty is its own kind of freedom. And to you, the one listening now, I want you to hear this. If someone ever tries to convince you that your instincts are wrong, if they call you paranoid or crazy when you notice the cracks, trust yourself anyway. Lies thrive in silence. But the moment you gather the truth, the moment you hold it in your hands, their power begins to collapse. Revenge does not always mean screaming or destroying. Sometimes it means standing in the light, calm and unshaken, while the truth speaks for itself. That was my revenge. Not the rage, not the drama, but the steady revelation that stripped him bare in front of the world. He said the ring was lost, but when I saw it gleaming on her finger, I knew what I had to do. And when I finally stood in that ballroom, holding the truth for everyone to see, I stopped being the woman he tried to silence. I became the woman who ended his lies. This is my story, and it is finished. But your story, your fight, your strength is still unfolding. Trust your instincts. Guard your proof. And never let anyone convince you that you are less than the truth you carry.